I forget where exactly I heard it, but I was immediately captivated by the idea that at one point there was such a mystery around the gorilla, and that people outside of Africa even thought it to be a myth. The Kraken, the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, Cyclops, the Yeti, sea monsters, Okelembembe, dragons, gorilla. It seems strange, no? That a seemingly ubiquitous creature should find itself among the ranks of other cryptids. Natives shroud the great ape with stories of spirits and possession, a propensity to kidnap humans and use fashioned weapons. And, for the outsider, their first accounts of the beast leave much to the imagination. In the 6th century BC, Carthage launched exploratory expeditions to the west coast of Africa, led by Hanno the Navigator, and to the coasts of northwestern Europe, led by Himilco. We'll get to him later. The following passage is the final entry in Hanno's Periplus, at the terminus of his expedition. In the recess of this bay, there was an island, like the former one, having a lake, in which there was another island, full of savage men. They were winged, too, in even greater number. They had hairy bodies, and the interpreters called them gorilla. When we pursued them, we were unable to take any of the men, but they all escaped by climbing the steep places and defending themselves with stones. But we took 3 of the women, who bit and scratched their leaders and would not follow us. So we killed them and flayed them and brought their skins to Carthage, for we did not voyage further, provisions failing us. Out of all the possible locations scholars debate Hanno ended his voyage, none featured the description of concentric islands within a bay. Already the location of our story is rather mythical, a distant, mysterious land teeming with all sorts of new and strange creatures, a place inhabited by unknown tribes, cultures, traditions, some of which resemble the familiar, others the anomalous. But perhaps the thing that intrigues the people of Carthage the most upon your return are the native tales of giant, hairy anthropomorphic creatures whose guttural roar would turn over the stomach of even Hannibal himself. Tribesmen counting the movement of the beast, who perturbs the foliage, alerting you of its presence long before you ever see it, if you see it. The popping of their chests as they rush you. The skins of those creatures were hung in a Carthaginian temple until the city was destroyed by the Romans in 146 BC, according to Roman author Pliny the Elder. Imagine returning to Carthage with such tales, as well as your own encounter with the hirsute savages. One can only imagine the exaggerated stories behind those skins, long after they were hung in that Carthaginian temple. Stories akin to those told to Paul du Chaillu by natives during his mid-19th century expedition to equatorial Africa. As we lay about the fire in the evening, the adventure of the day was talked over, and
of course
there
followed some curious stories of the gorillas. I listened in silence to the conversation, and was rewarded by hearing the stories as they were believed. It's thought in all this country that there is a kind of gorilla, known to the initiated to be residents of spirits of certain departed natives. Such gorillas, they believe, can never be caught or killed, possessed animals, monsters as some would put it, where the intelligence of man is united with the strength and the ferocity of the beast. Several natives spoke up thusly, naming men, now dead, whose spirits were known to be dwelling in gorillas. One of the men told the story of the most peculiar kind. A gorilla was said to have, upon encountering an elephant in the forest, broke down a large tree, and brandishing it like a club made at the elephant, whom he soon killed. Days later, a man chanced upon the murder. On the ground, laying beside the body, was the gorilla's club. This story the narrator showed me was a fact. I think he firmly believed it. Finally came the most harrowing account. The natives thought that the gorilla would lie amongst the dense foliage waiting for those who might get too close. Using its powerful feet, the beast would knock, then grasp the unlucky individual and draw them up a tree where, quietly, he would choke the living breath out of their throat.
The myth of the gorilla is twofold: its existence and its behavior, both of which can be seen from two perspectives. That of the outsiders, Paul du Chaillu and Hanno, for example, and that of the locals, Miengai and Makinda, natives contracted by du Chaillu during his hunt for the gorilla. For the outsider, the gorilla is not only seen as your standard monster, fiercely strong, massive in size, crazy stories surrounding its name, but given the lack of evidence for its existence, there is a degree of separation. It lives merely in mystery, joining others in mythical canon. The gorilla is no more than the minotaur, dragon, cyclops. But for the locals, who may know people or even seen a gorilla themselves, the stories surrounding the beast now actually have a living creature attached to them. I'd imagine, with the technology the natives possessed, defending, let alone killing a gorilla, would have been nearly impossible. It's there, it exists, yet fear prevents you from inquiring further. The mind conjures terror, thusly. From the first account in the 6th century BC to the confirmed existence of this new species in 1847, there are but a few references to the gorilla by outsiders in over 2,000 years, as per anthropologist Ashley Montague's 1940 paper, Knowledge of the Ape in Antiquity. In the late 16th century, Andrew Battle, an Englishman held captive by the Portuguese in Angola, tells of two monsters, as he, or the natives, put it, known as Mpungu and Ngeko, the gorilla and chimpanzee respectively. James Burnet, commonly known as Lord Monboddo, obtained a letter in the 18th century from a man who knew a ship captain trading with the west coast of Africa. In the letter, the captain compares a beast to the chimpanzee. It's 7 to 9 feet tall, thick in proportion and amazingly strong, covered with long, jet-black hair. He calls this animal Impungu. Lastly, the Ngena, referred to by Thomas Bowditch during his early 19th century mission to Africa. Though Bowditch never saw the animal, his description of the beast and separation of it from other apes puts it rather likely that Ngena is in fact the gorilla. For 2,000 or so years, the gorilla lived in hearsay for the outsider and even those still living in Africa who were not sufficiently near its habitat. The first scientific inquiry into the gorilla was only conducted in 1847 by Thomas Savage and Jeffries Wyman, but even then, it was only on bones Savage had acquired while in Liberia. Up until now, no outsider had definitively seen, alive, and confirmed the existence of the gorilla. Though chimpanzee and other apes were already known to the outside world, and monkeys were known to the ancients for millennia, their behaviors, like the gorilla, too were shrouded in mystery. Seeing the gorilla live, thus confirming its existence, would put half of the mythos to rest. With knowledge of apes being scarce, and the allure of an unseen, new species of ape out there in the thick of the jungle, it was only a matter of time before man set out to discover the myth. Suddenly, Miengai uttered a little croaking tone,
which is the native's way of showing that something is stirring. I noticed ahead of us seemingly a noise as of someone breaking down branches in the foliage. I knew at once this was the gorilla. My men carefully examined their guns to see if any powder had fallen out of the pans. I, too, examined mine. We advanced with the greatest care. The singular noise of breaking branches continued. As we crept along, the sound of foliage breaking was interrupted by the barking roar of the gorilla. The Suddenly, the jungle swayed rapidly just ahead. At last, before us, stood the immense male gorilla. He erected himself and looked us boldly in the face. He stood about a dozen yards from us. It was a sight I'll never forget. With a hellish expression on his face, he was not afraid of us. We were afraid of him. His eyes began to flash fierce fire as we stood motionless on the defense. His powerful fangs were shown as his thunderous roar shook the jungle and our very hearts. Now truly he reminded me of nothing but some dream creature from hell, a being of that hideous order, the native tales, half man, half beast. He advanced. We took aim with our rifles, hoping they would not kill us. Not more than 6 yards from us, there, dead, lay the body of the slain beast.
Paul Duchaillou caught a glimpse into the native stories, the first time an European outsider had ever seen the beast in all its glory, and, in a split second, the myth withered to the status of a mere animal at the hands of human technology. After over 2,000 years, the gorilla had been found. Sea monsters have long held their place at the top of sailors' fears when embarking on new, uncharted seas. If we look at old maps, we notice the plethora of monsters lining the oceans, letting every seaman know, beware all those who sail here. But where did the first accounts of these creatures begin? Do you remember Himilco, the other Carthaginian explorer sent out simultaneously with Hanno? He's recognized as the first known Mediterranean explorer to sail the northwest coasts of Europe. For us, however, the account of his voyage is what we want. In Novenius's Ora Maritima, a 4th century poem, he writes about Himilco's journey. Quote, "There, monsters of the deep, and beasts swim amid the slow and sluggish crawling ships." Now, what if I told you Hanno's account of the savage, hairy creatures on the island might have not happened? What if I told you instead that it was all fabricated by the Carthaginians? They wouldn't dream of allowing such a text from both Hanno and Himilco to be distributed with accurate information, lest they incite competing empires to venture out as well. Better to keep the potential spoils from these new, untapped lands to ourselves. Who would want to brave seas teeming with hellish creatures? Who would want to explore far-off lands with monsters, anthropomorphic beasts? The second half of the mythos around the gorilla is its behavior. If you told anyone the stories the natives had, you'd be met with some confused looks. Of course, gorillas aren't inhabited by human spirits, waiting around for people to choke out. And they'd be right, for someone living in the 21st century. But it wasn't too long ago when films like this was the first experience someone had in seeing a gorilla in action, even though it was in stop motion. It was only within the last 60 years that the trope of the violent, sex-crazed beast was flipped entirely on its head by the research of conservationist George Schaller and primatologist Dian Fossey, who pioneered field research into gorilla behavior. Fossey herself even lived with and was a welcome guest in the gorilla family at one point. One need only take a look at the abundant footage online of gorillas interacting with humans to see that not only are they not intrinsically violent, but their seemingly uncharacteristic patience with intruders in their natural habitat is enough to dispel the myth of their ferocity, the myth of the gorilla.